Enablement folks, just by their very nature, we're in service, and so we say yes a lot, regardless of whether or not it's something that should be done. My response is, if everything's a priority, nothing is. I have something called the 5 questions. Are we actually doing the things that are going to move the needle now, not move the needle in 6 months or a year? So the first one is, how's it aligned with go-to-market? The second is, given everything we're already doing, where does this fit in the priority? The next one is, how are you going to measure it? Fourth one is, what behavior do you expect to change? And then the last one is there credible urgency to this? I had a situation where sales manager, in front of his boss and my boss and VPs and everybody else, said that he and his team didn't make his number that quarter because enablement was bad. Oh, so you wanted me and my team to go out and close all your business for you then? And he said, well, that's not what I said. I said, that is exactly what you said, right? Because enablement is only a piece of this puzzle.
What AI tools are actually working right now?
A masterclass I did in about 12 hours what would have taken me 4 months to do. And I did it myself with input from the CRO, and I used Claude for that. But the downside of it is if you're using AI for everything, then everything is homogenous.
You joined Demandbase about a year ago. And so let's set some stage for the listeners who are maybe not familiar. Like, what does Demandbase do? What does the go-to-market org kind of look like that you help support?
So Demandbase helps B2B companies focus sales and marketing and make sure that the accounts they're trying to sell into are the right accounts. So it helps them with pipeline growth. It helps them avoid missed revenue targets. It helps them with sales and marketing alignment. And it helps them essentially waste less budget, pretty much.
And so how big, like how many sellers are you supporting? And how many was it when you started? And
I've got about 300. Got about 300
okay.
across both acquisition and retention side of the business. So the new business side, as well as growth and expansion in the CX side. That also includes professional services, the pre-sales folks, so solution consulting. Who am I missing? I think that's, and of course, my team.
And so like, what does enablement kind of look like when you first join the company? And like, I'm curious, like when you join a company that's obviously established and has, 300 sellers, like how do you think about priorities? How do you sort of think about tackling, building out, sort of the next generation of the enablement program at Demandbase?
A lot of what I did when I first started, well, first of all, when I started, it was the fixer of broken things, right? Oh, I know, it's a problem. Dump it on enablement. I mean, that's what it was. There wasn't a leader here. And so enablement folks, just by their very nature, we're in service. And so we say yes a lot, regardless of whether or not it's something that should be done. And so I spent my first, I would say 2 to 3 months meeting with all the sales leaders, meeting with the CEO, the CFO, the CMO, all the PMM folks, just to get a handle on where we were and what we were doing. And then the very next thing I did was, first of all, ensure that the team that I had was the right team, and then making sure that the projects we were working on were the right projects, because frankly, 60% of them were ones that weren't aligned. I have something called the 5 questions, and I'll go into that later, but it was teaching my team how to make sure that what we were working on was not only the right things, but had been agreed upon with our strategic partners who are sales leadership and, frontline managers on up, right? Are we actually doing the things that are going to move the needle, and move the needle now, not move the needle in 6 months or a year?
So because you brought it up, I'm curious, like what are the 5 questions? I assume that helps with the prioritization framework of all the things?
Because the hardest thing for us to do is always to say no, right? Or not yet, or not us, right? Along that line. And so the 5 questions, I actually wrote a LinkedIn article about it. The first one is, how is this aligned with go-to-market, right? This project you want me to do. Now, this is whether it's someone on my team, somebody in sales, somebody in leadership, somebody in, it doesn't matter. If they're coming to me and asking us to do something, these 5 questions go out. So the first one is, how's it aligned with go-to-market? Now, that is predicated on the hope that there is clarity in go-to-market, right? And so that's also part of what I work on, is that clarity piece. But how's it aligned with the go-to-market? The second is, given everything we're already doing, not just for you, but for your team, for our division, and for the company on a whole, where does this fit in the priority, right? And of course, everybody says it's priority 1. And my response is, if everything's a priority, nothing is. And so let's start with what you've already asked us to do. What are you willing to push? What are you willing to stop? in order for this to be worked on? And a lot of times they go, never mind. I'm like, yeah, thought so. The next one is, how are you going to measure it? And what I hear a lot is, well, we want them to learn it, or we want to make sure they take the training. I mean, I'm like, that is not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is, what are you expected that is going to change from now, that is going to show that we are making advancements either in performance or reduction in attrition or reduction in churn, something along that line. Give me business KPIs. I am concerned about the vanity metrics for enablement. That is not your concern. Your concern is, are we doing the right things? Are we measuring it appropriately? Because if we don't have a measure, what's the point? Fourth one is, what behavior do you expect to change? Right? What do you want them to actually do? Make more calls, access more LinkedIn, do deeper research, not spend as much time on administrivia, whatever it is. What do you want them to do, physically do? And then the last one is the urgency, right? Is there credible urgency to this? Or is it I just had this idea? I mean, as I tell people, the scariest 5 words to me in enablement are hey, I have a great idea. And I'm like, oh, Lord. Okay. And so that's where the 5 questions come in.
Especially now with AI, everyone's got a good idea.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, and it comes from everywhere, right? Because the CEO, the CRO, I've had all of them like, hey, I've got a great idea. And we have a chat about, is it really a great idea now? Maybe it's something for later. Right? That kind of thing. So that's the 5 questions. And it was those 5 questions that I taught the team. And then we evaluated and investigated everything we were working on to see whether or not we actually had that data. Right? We created an Asana spreadsheet. They already had an Asana sheet, but it was, here's a person who requested it from this group. Here's when it's due. There was nothing else in there. And so we expanded it to include these other pieces. It was a learning opportunity for not only my team, but also for the folks internally, because they weren't used to answering those questions, right? It typically was, hey, give it to Mikey. Mike will lead anything, right? It's one of those. So, but it really helped. It really helped get my team focused, gave them the ability to say no or not us or not now or whatever through these series of questions.
It's a great framework. And I think prioritization was, I think, one of the things I learned as a young exec. I used to work at a company called Lattice, and it was my first job. I was the 3rd employee there and then became the VP. And you're a marketing, there's a million things you could do. There's a million ideas. So the CEO and COO would always come at me like, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? And then I had a marketing coach at the time who was like, let's just do a simple exercise of above the line, below the line, the 5 things we care about that. And it saved me, because if you don't have that prioritization at the beginning, then you can't be successful as a leader of here's the things that I actually need to focus on. So I really like this framework.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm curious how you thought, one of the things you had mentioned was you had to make sure you had the right team. And so I'm curious, maybe flash forwarding to today, how is the enablement team structured at Demandbase, and how do you sort of think about that structure?
We have a small and mighty team, right? I've got 5 enablement folks. And I've got 2 designers. The designers are actually creating e-learning for our customers. So I adopted them about 2 months ago. But in my enablement team, there is a tools and I'll call her, a PMO, a project manager kind of person. I have somebody who does product, who is liaison between product and enablement and the Salesforce. I have someone who is field enablement. And he covers not only new business, but also growth and SDRs at the moment. We're desperately in need of another person. And then I've got someone that covers the CX side of the business. So it is not so growth is more of the we're told a customer is interested. Now we go in and we try to sell it. Where CX is more the customer discussions and support and all of that kind of good stuff. And and then one person who does onboarding.
And so you have them sort of structured against the funnel. And then I assume each of those enablement folks kind of can partner with, they have their partner on the other side, on the sales team or the CS team. And then they can kind of work together, develop, okay, what's the enablement roadmap, sort of that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of what I gave them too. By having the 5 questions, they were able to, we know what we're doing and now we can have an actual voice, right? That was where they really struggled, is that they were being directed instead of believing in themselves and relying on what their knowledge was and, what their experience was in these types of roles for this company.
I'm curious, do you have like a top of mind example of that, of something that maybe the enablement function brought to the table and sort of, pushing the sales team or the CS team to, here's a program that we want to put in place that we think you should do, as opposed to, as you said, like being directed from the sales side?
I think there's a few things. One is the company had been product led for a long time. So most of the sales opportunities, when you listen to calls and all, it was product, 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 product. The problem is, and this is something I, worked very hard to get across, and the good thing is the CRO who started probably 2 months before me feels the same way, is that it's gotta be a value-based and a customer first conversation. Otherwise, you're simply a list and a check boxes on a clipboard, and then it's yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. How much is it? Right? And that's what it comes down to. Demandbase is an investment, right? It's definitely not the most expensive or most inexpensive out there for a reason, right? There's a ton of capability in it, but I didn't want them to continue doing the product sell, right? And so we moved from that much more to a value based, and I'll call it value. It's not value based selling as in the traditional sense of it, but it was, what are our customers really dealing with, right? ABM is a capability. It's a type of tool, but what is it solving? And so we looked at things like, is it missed revenue targets? Is it sales and marketing alignment? Is it bad data? Is it, uh, a lack of account knowledge, right? Are we deep enough in the account knowledge? Are they actually reaching out to the right people? Or is it just this scattershot and hoping that somebody is going to nod and say, okay, talk to me? So that's really how we transformed and are continuing to transform how we go to market.
And there's something like very meta about enabling sellers to sell an ABM tool and sales intelligence, right? Like, I assume they're obviously using the tool. I'm just going to assume that to sell, right? And so, like, how does that shape your enablement work? Does it make product education easier, or like, how do you think about that? It's like a kind of an interesting dynamic.
Well, I would say that for a long time, Demandbase was shoemaker's children, right? We were selling something and not necessarily using it, or weren't aware we were using it. Like our DB1 for sales, for example, everybody was using it, but it was hidden in behind Salesforce. Right now, we made a concerted effort to say, no, we want you actually interacting with it all day long, right? You need to be able to understand. And I think it was that gave our sellers the empathy. It gave them the knowledge of how this was actually helping them. Because ultimately, my stakeholder is not my internal folks. My stakeholder is my customers' stakeholders. Because what we are doing is helping them provide for their people and for their customers. So if those folks aren't buying from our customers aren't buying from us, and there you have it.
It's a very similar dynamic at Doc where, we're an enablement tool. We create deal rooms. We sell to our customers, but it's only successful if our customer's customer is successful using it, right? And getting the value that they need as an end user. So yeah, very, very interesting. Going back to the team building stuff, I had one other question. I know you've led much bigger teams, and you're at Salesforce and Slack and RingCentral. You saw a lot of growth. I think like went from 3 to 162.
162. Yeah.
Crazy. Like, what does a 162 person enablement team look like?
Of course, we started out with a smaller group of salespeople. I mean, we were supporting initially about 200 people, and we ended up supporting 10,000 by the time I left, right? So what happened is, as the sales teams moved up market, as they got bigger, we got bigger because the ratio, we had to make sure that we were able to support them the way we did. So we were restructuring, we were, doing the things that needed to be done so that enablement could support. Then realize around year 3, I realized that the only difference between what I was delivering and what the rest of the company needed was how they were gauged on performance. Everything else was the same, right? Which is, how's it align with go-to-market, right? Do you all understand the message? What are you using the websites properly? Are you producing content that aligns with go-to-market? Are you making it easy for folks to find this information? And then the last part is, how are you gauged? How are you measured on performance? That was the only difference. So I went to senior leadership and said, I want all of it. I want to enable everybody in the company, because what we're doing on the sales side with onboarding and with all of that is much more structured so that the rest of the company could definitely take advantage of it, right? They could take advantage of this value first discussions. They could take advantage of understanding the company. I mean, one of the first things we do is with new hires, especially on the sales side, and we do it here too, is here's why the company exists. Here's why Demandbase exists. This is what we are helping customers solve. Here are the customers we work with. Here's the products we have and how they fit into all of that. Because what I discovered is outside of the sales organization, or, PMM essentially, no one else knew the answer to that. Nobody knew the origin stories. Nobody knew any of that. So they were brought in through corporate onboarding. They would have I know mine at RingCentral, I had half a day. I had half a day. They, gave me my laptop, says, here's how you get to all your benefits, which of course I forgot immediately. And here's a desk. I didn't know the tools. I mean, I'd done research, of course, during the interview process, but I didn't know. And in fact, I was a month in when my boss came to me and said, you have to stop sending me emails. You need to use the internal messaging system. I'm like, I don't know how to use it. Glip. I don't know how to use it. And he's like, oh, move over. And he sat down beside me and gave me like 15 minutes. That's all I needed. But nobody was getting that. And so we took over the whole onboarding for the company. We took over supporting engineering and everybody. We were doing enablement for the whole thing. And that's kind of how things grew. We also took over customer training, right? So I turned customer training into a revenue stream where it wasn't before. Customer training was always the first thing on the invoice that went, and they scratched it through. We're going to discount by not charging you for any of the training. And so one of the things I did is say, we're not going to do that anymore. Number one, we've got 30 trainers out here who don't know whether they're valued at all, right? Because you're not charging anything, customers maybe show up, maybe they don't, right? It's like, eh. So I said, we need to change that. We have to deliver it in 3 different ways, right? If they're willing to take training right off the website, great, $0. Knock yourself out. If they want instructor-led, it's going to be a certain price. If they want us to go on site, it's going to be more. If they want us to customize anything, it's going to be even more. So it was like 500, 1,000, 2,000, something like that. And I was like, no. So we changed it. So it was 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. And they're like, that'll never fly. And I'm like, you watch what happens. Because all of a sudden now it had, not only was there a line item on the invoice that people could see that if it was discounted, here's how much they were getting. But also folks are all of a sudden, ooh, it must be really valuable for that. And so they were like, our first quarter, once we did that, we had $250,000 pipeline in the first quarter. We closed $500,000 by the end of the second. Closed revenue for this brand new stream. And it's just because we looked at things differently.
And it makes the customer more committed to the training too. If they're going to pay 5, 10, 20K for it, like they're going to show up, they're going to take it seriously. Then they onboard your product. Like it's amazing how much, I like as somebody starting a company, you're always scared to charge and I want to charge low, but like the more we charge, actually, the better the customers are because they're more bought in. They're willing to, work alongside you.
That's right. They perceive value.
Yeah. It's amazing how it works.
Right. If they're getting something for free, then they think it's, a throwaway. If they're investing, there's perceived value and they will follow up.
You gave an example there of what bad onboarding looked like, I think, when you first started at RingCentral. But what is good onboarding? Like, what is world-class onboarding? Maybe we could talk about what's kind of Demandbase's onboarding program today.
Yeah, I mean, Demandbase's onboarding program, it's all around the 3 Ps, right? It's people's, process, product. So we spent a lot of time around people, company, getting them to know the origin stories, getting them to understand our customers, understanding use cases. Why do customers buy from us? Like, what is it, right? So the whys, why are they buying? Why are they buying now? Why are they buying Demandbase, right? All of that is all done up front. Then there is the process piece, which is, here's how we sell at Demandbase. This is what it looks like, right? We're using, the spiced model from Winning by Design. We are, doing 9-box models from Solution Selling. We are, right? There's all of these pieces. Get them to understand how we sell. And then the last part is product. But that's very light, right? I remember talking to somebody who said they had a 3-month onboarding And they were losing people after a month and a half. And I said, well, tell me what it is. And they said, well, we spend the first 2 months on product and we go deep, 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 deep on product. But they're not, 50% of our people are quitting at a month and a half. And I'm like, well, no kidding. They don't need product that early. They need to know kind of what it is and kind of what it does and why customers buy from us. But going deep on product, they need to be able to have conversations, not go deep on product. They have to have value conversations, not product conversations. So it was always light. It's light on that one. And as they get more experienced, we make sure that they can fish for the things they need. Now, not just fish for the things they need, because if you think about that, it's like I fished for all of this stuff and I put it all in my fish basket and great. And I come back to it 6 months later and I take the lid off and it stinks, right? Out of date. It's no good. I mean, you can just imagine. So rather than that, it's like we need to teach them how to fish, but how to fish in the moment of need and how to fish for what they're really looking for, not just throw the lure in and hope that you're going to catch something, right? And so it really is, precision over volume, if you will. We want to be very precise on that.
And is there like a capstone to the onboarding where they get in front of, you or other managers and they have to kind of practice a value sale pitch or qualification? And so there's like a certification thing?
The platform we use has an AI coach and an AI role play capability.
Oh, cool.
So we can have them do AI role plays over and over again for various types of personas, various types of customers, markets, all of that. And so a lot of that gets done. And then at the end, they have to be able to present back. So they record themselves and upload that recording to the platform, and their managers go in, and their senior managers and our enablement folks, we all go in, take a look, comment, all of that to make sure that the manager knows who they're getting on the next week, right? So we have there's a lot of self-learning, self-serve learning in there. But, AI has really made a difference when it comes to that. We don't need to involve the frontline managers as deeply as they would have needed to be involved in the past.
I mean, the AI role play space is blowing up. I was at an enablement conference 2 weeks ago. It was crazy. I mean, how many vendors and things. It's super interesting. Do you use it mostly on the onboarding side? Do you find, because I guess one thing I've heard is it's super valuable for onboarding, as you said, for cold calling, for like younger sales folks, but maybe like your more tenured reps are not using role play, or do you deploy it across like, hey, we have a new product we're releasing, go practice it?
We go across the board. I don't care if you're 100 or you're 10, right? You have to role play, because if you don't role play and you don't practice, then it's not going to stick, right? I don't know how many SKOs I've been at where it is, we're going to do all this fabulous training and there's no follow-up. And there is a surprise 2 months later. It's like, well, they've just gone back to the way they did it. It's because you didn't reinforce it, right? I think it's Erlinger. I can't remember the Erlinger's curve, right? After 30 days, they only retain 7% of what you taught them, right? If you don't reinforce, right? You've got to keep that going. And so with these AI role plays and the AI coaches, we push everybody through the platform, right? If we're putting something out, now it doesn't mean they're all taking the same thing. So let me be clear on that, right? The idea of these corporate-wide certifications and everybody has to do it, and no, right? It's precision over volume, right? We don't necessarily need everybody to go it, and not everything needs a certification, right? It can be a knowledge check, right? The least, the ones with the least experience, like BDRs, SDRs, maybe small business, they probably need a little more of the coaching and knowledge checking and things when new stuff comes out. Whereas when you've got high performers, my advice is just get out of their way. Make sure they know where to find everything, right? Make sure you've given them the rod and the reel and the lures, give them all that, but let them go get it when they need it. Because forcing them through certifications and forcing everybody through all the same stuff, it's just ambiguity. And it's a challenge. And the moment you do that and somebody is taking something that doesn't make any sense, you lost them. And from that point forward, as I said, it goes from being, something that they really want to use and a choice for their performance to a chore. And it's I've got to do this. So it just has to be delivered in such a way.
Totally makes sense. And I think one of the important things you mentioned there was what happens after the training, the reinforcement side of things. And obviously, managers play a really big role in kind of the reinforcement post training. But I've heard you say like kind of the biggest failure in enablement is that managers don't always know how to coach. Not because they won't, but they just don't quite know the best way to do that. And so, like, why is that such a problem and how do you overcome it?
I think there's a variety of reasons. Number one, it was never a focus for a long time for most companies. The focus was, what have you done for me lately? Let's look at pipeline, let's look at forecasts. Didn't look at skills, didn't look at all that stuff. Now, the really good managers did, but it wasn't a consistent program they had running. And so as you had, for example, as you have high performers moved into management roles, big mistake, by the way, because the high performers do it because it's an unconscious competence. So they have a really hard time telling people what they do, right? So that one thing is a big mistake. But as you have AEs moving into management roles, if they haven't been coached on how to do it, they're just going to play what they've learned, which in the most part is just going to be, again, it's the pipeline and the forecast stuff, right? And it's not gonna fly. It doesn't work. It doesn't mean they don't want to. They just don't know. So we spend a lot of time saying, okay, if you're doing a pipeline call, focus on pipeline. Doing a forecast call, focus on forecast. If you're doing account management, focus on that. Territory planning, focus on that. Skills, don't forget the skills. Focus on that. So keep the one-on-ones so that they're focused and they have a regular schedule cadence to them. So they're happening at the right time, you're asking all the right questions, and you're actually getting in and investigating what is actually really going on.
How do you develop those skills? Are you doing manager offsites where you're having sessions and talking to people? Or is it more like, because I assume you're not listening it on people's one-on-ones, where they're talking with their, reps. And so how do you sort of think about coaching the managers and getting insight into how they're even doing coaching in the first place? It shows up in the numbers, but it's hard to get a sense of people's skills, I find.
It starts really at the root of the request, which is, and it's like kids, right? If you want kids to do something, if you get them involved in the decision, they'll do it a lot more. Then that's the same with any type of enablement that you're doing, is if you get them involved in the discussion, if they're involved in the 5 questions, if they're involved in giving you feedback on what's really working, right? If you've got that corporate intelligence that they're bringing and customer intelligence, get that early so that you make sure that what you're doing is going to be there. Then when you roll it out to managers first. They're involved in all of this. They are auditing, right? As opposed to being trained, they're auditing to make sure they're on the same page. So by the time it gets to the feet on the street, the bag carrying folks, everybody above them's already done it. And I mean everybody above them. Like we did a big pitch contest for our RKO. And the CEO reached out to me and said, I want to do it too. I was like, God, I love you. And so, he was one of the first ones to do it. And they were all rated, right? That AI coach went in and gave them scores, and their peers had to go in and give them scores, and right, CRO had to do it, all the SVPs, everybody did. So you have that kind of waterfall responsibility. And when you do that, the managers are a lot more invested. They start to learn, because it's not just the managers who don't know how to coach. If you go up another level, they don't know how to coach managers. And you go up another level, they don't know how to coach, VPs. I mean, it's this whole hierarchy of need, really.
And it's super hard. I mean, coming up in sales, you learn how to close the deal and work with the customer, but then you become a manager and it's like, oh my God, how do I become a people leader? And then it just kind of keeps going up. And I mean, being a CRO is so different than being a sales manager and stuff. And like, no one's teaching you.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And you have to learn how to do it. Like you said, being an AE, I learned how to close a deal, if you were lucky. A lot of times what you see is at the end of every quarter, it goes into full-on hockey stick. Managers are like, oh my God, I'm just going to go out and close everything myself. Remember, high performers. But when they get out there, there's no coverage. They can't get enough out there. And so you start to see big discounts and deals slip and all of that, because they're not spending the time on the skills with their own people to say, here's how you close. This is what negotiation looks like. Here's what a pre-proposal looks like. Here's what, discovery, and here's what alignment looks like between you and the rest of your sales franchise, right? I mean, here's how it all works. If they haven't even been taught that, then they won't be closing the deals either.
I think one of the interesting dynamics is go to market and enablement is obviously everyone's aligned to the revenue number. But I've also heard you say things like enablement is responsible to, not for the business. Can you talk like what that means and kind of get into your enablement philosophy?
That is the absolute linchpin of this whole thing, of enablement being able to work, is this responsible to, not for. So it's that, hashtag R2N4. That's, people recognize it as that. What it means is that we are, as enablement, we are responsible to our sales managers, frontline managers and up, to provide them with the best possible enablement we can. That could be messaging. It could be product release information. It could be skill training. Whatever that is, it is our job, and we are responsible to do that. We are not responsible for the sale. So what that means is, again, we are working very closely, strategic partnerships, on what we're actually delivering as enablement. Once we are ready to go, it becomes the responsibility and accountability of sales management, frontline manager on up, for the execution of the program. Because even though I'm sure most of us could, in fact, go out and close deals, right? A lot of us came from sales and just risk averse and like, no, don't do that. I'm sure we could do it, but the responsibility for that execution comes from the management chain. Right. And that is, I get that set from the very beginning if I'm joining a company, because if I don't have that support, doesn't matter. All it takes is one influential manager to go, I don't want to do it. And it's a house of cards. It falls apart. So you absolutely have to have that, right? Because again, it's that choice versus chore. If enablement is the stick, you have to go do this and you're pounding, it becomes a chore. Right? If their manager is saying, no, for your skills and your performance and for your learning, you need to be able to do this stuff, that has a very different connotation. It becomes a choice. Right? And so that is really, really important. I had a situation where sales manager at a QBR, in front of his boss and my boss and VPs and everybody else, said that he and his team didn't make his number that quarter because enablement was bad. And my response immediately was, oh, so you wanted me and my team to go out and close all your business for you then? And he said, well, that's not what I said. I said, that is exactly what you said, because enablement is only a piece of this puzzle, right? And so you're responsible for the sale. You responsible for the execution of these programs. Because if you don't have that, if R2N4 is not established early on, doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter how good your enablement team is. Doesn't matter what the resources are like, what the investment's like, what your programs look like. They will ultimately fail.
And so then how do you think about like what is enablement gold on, or how do you measure what's working? Are you doing like internal CSAT to see what the sales team feels about the programs you're building? Do you think of it in terms of like the inputs into the programs, like we've delivered this many trainings or different things? Like how do you sort of think about measuring your own team success?
Those are what I call vanity metrics, right? So they're important to me. I need to know, is this hitting the mark? Are we getting the throughput that we expect? What do the scores look like, right? Are there teams that are doing it and teams that aren't? Now, but that's not what my stakeholders care about. They care about, is the needle moving? So I can take all of those vanity metrics, but I need to align them with all the performance metrics to say, if, did this enablement process that we went through, this program we ran, did it change anything? Did behavior change? Do numbers change? Right? Ultimately it's sales velocity, right? Did our deal wins go up? Did the average sales price go up? Did the length of sale shorten, right? Were those things impacted? And so it's being able to deliver that information in that tone with that kind of data, because they really don't care about the vanity stuff. They really don't. And this is why a lot of enablement leaders can struggle, because they go in thinking, we had 98% of the people went through it and the average score was, 92 out of 100 and we got great CSATs. And leaders are going, and I haven't seen any difference. Like nothing is happening here. So it's being able to have those business conversations. I'm calling it it's a business within a business. You have to be able to talk about it like a business.
But then how do you reconcile that with the responsible to, not for? Because I guess it's just, you think you have this indirect like puppeteer sort of lever to get to the actual number? Because you obviously have to, for you to hit your goals, the sales team has to perform well. So how do you think about that kind of dynamic? I mean, that's just the game, I guess.
That's the game. That's how it all goes together, right? Like they have to perform. There's a quid pro quo. When I talk about my investors, that's anybody that wants to give me anything. Could be money, could be people, could be time, could be whatever it is. But the quid pro quo is I have to give them back the results they're expecting for this. And as I give them back the results they're expecting for this, I get more, right? That's how you grow. There is the supply chain, and the supply chain is marketing, PMM, right? Anybody that wants to put something in front of the salespeople, that's my supply chain. And my discussion with the supply chain is, what do you really want, right? What's a quid pro quo? And their big thing is adoption, right? You go to any company and ask them how much of the marketing material is actually seen by sales. You'll see numbers in the 20%, maybe 15%, maybe 25%, which means 75% of all the work that's being done by marketing is never seen, right? It's just lost. And so like, how do we change that? And I said, you change it really, really easily. And it's this way. First thing is, don't give me a 1 hour long video. Don't give me a 50 slide deck. Not going to work. Nobody has that attention span anymore. Instead, what I want is you to break things up into consumable chunks, first of all. And then next, I want you to do two things. The first thing is, if I'm a seller, what's in it for me? Why should I even care about this? Is it going to open up more opportunities for me? Am I going to get bigger commissions? Is there a spiff associated? What is it, right? What's in it for me? That's how you start. And then the next thing is, how is it going to help my customer buy from me? Not how is it going to help me sell? Marketing's in marketing for a reason, sales in sales for a reason, right? Marketing should not be telling sales how to sell. What they do need to help sales with is understanding how customers are buying, because that's what we really need to know. So give me the 5 to 10 open-ended questions that I can ask in a conversation. When I say customer, I mean either existing customer or prospect. I just use it generally across the board. And it is, give me the 5 to 10 open-ended questions I can ask that are going to allow me to introduce this to a customer and see where we sit with it. Do they see value with it up front? If not, can I create value in their mind? If I can't create value in their mind, can I reset their vision? And if I can't reset their vision, get out, move on, right? I mean, how many deals go way past when they should? I mean, so expensive, so costly to do that. But it's saying, give me those questions so I can have that conversation. It also is a very different conversation for most customers. They're used to getting, pounded with all of this product info. We don't even talk about product info initially at all. It's all values. It's all those pains I talked about at the beginning. It's all of that type of a discussion.
I'm curious about like your relationship with the marketing team, because you obviously have a very strong point of view on the type of content that's going to work well in the sales process. But, marketing is going to do marketing and create things and whatever, and they have their own point of view. So what does that like sort of relationship look like between the enablement team and marketing? Like, are you reviewing every piece of collateral that gets in front of sales? Like, how do you give feedback? I mean, it's probably an interesting dance.
That's why I have a product enablement person. She works very closely with that team. Most of marketing is top of the funnel. And so, great. Show me what you're doing. That's cool. I'm not going to get involved in that at all. What I do want, though, is once things start getting down further into the funnel, when we actually start having these conversations, I need to be able to make sure that my stakeholders, my folks, are armed with the right questions to ask. Because most companies, when they come to us, most of these customers already have done all their research now, especially with the tools we have now. What they're trying to find out is, do you understand their pain? Can you help them solve the pain? And can you have conversations understanding what their business is about and what they care about, as opposed to pounding product into them?
Makes sense. Switching gears a little bit, this wouldn't be a podcast in 2026 without talking about AI. We've talked a little bit about AI sales role play, but I'm curious, like, if maybe that's the primary example, but maybe there's others, like what AI tools are actually working right now, both for the enablement function, but also for sales teams, versus what feels like overpromised, under delivering, like what's actually working at Demandbase right now?
It depends on what group you're a part of. right? AI is very black and white, yes, no, when it comes to the development side of the company, right? Product engineering, all of that. It's pretty straightforward. AI for everybody else, though, gets a little wishy-washy, gets a little squishy, and you have to decide what it is you're really after, right? Like, we've got integrations internally with ChatGPT, right? Everybody uses ChatGPT. And so it's teaching them, number one, it's available, and two, what can you do with it? Other tools that are being used, well, most every tool now has some kind of an AI piece to it. Whether it's real AI or just machine learning, hmm, that's still a question. But having these tools now, they're helping out in some way, right? Me personally, I use ChatGPT for a lot of things. Pretty simple stuff. If I've got a quick question or go find me or, give me the one sentence that allows me to talk to these folks on the webcast today that what Demandbase does, right? Which is exactly what I did. And so it's that kind of stuff. When I get into doing much more complex, much more process, right? So, for example, a master class I did in about 12 hours what would have taken me 4 months to do. And I did it myself with input from the CRO, of course, and make sure that he was going to have buy-in on it. But it was going through and gathering all this stuff together. And I used Claude for that. Initially, it was just Claude Chat through the project, but then Claude Cowork came out. I was like, ooh, this is good because now I can save all this stuff. I don't have to start over from scratch every time I've got a new project I want to do. Haven't used Claude Code yet, but so I'm using those. I've used Notebook to take content and say, make a podcast out of it, or, a 5-minute video, or, these various pieces. So depending on what I want to do, it depends on the tool that I'm using. Everybody's got their own opinion. Everybody, I think internally, ChatGPT is a standard. We also have, of course, Microsoft is here. We're a Google shop. So we've got gems. We use a lot of gems. We're mostly Google. So it's mostly gems and things like that. So it's, workflows and agents and all those kinds of pieces that are used not only within our own software that we sell, but also internally with how we do workflows and things like that. It's still almost in its infancy because there's still so much to learn. There is, I was talking to somebody earlier today that I've been up and down through troughs of disillusionment. It's like, yay, oh, yay, oh, right? And so it's, look at this really cool thing. Oh, I can't integrate it with anything else. Look at that. Oh, it's not giving me the answers I want, right? I can't pull these pieces together. It's not answering the questions. And so you have to be very prescriptive. Again, as I talked about, right? Precision. You have to be prescriptive over what you want. You've got to really be able to synthesize, rename, right? Be able to put together the packages that make sense with AI. Where can it be used? Where can it not be used? Where shouldn't it be used? Because the downside of it is if you're using AI for everything, then everything is homogenous. And all you're doing is doing what everybody else out there in the big world is doing. There's no insight. There's no creativity. It's just not there. Right? The human in the loop is absolutely critical. Because I know you're going there. The human in the loop is really critical, right? You've got to stay in there. Like AI doesn't have intuition. It doesn't have empathy. It doesn't have gravitas. It doesn't have 40 years of experience doing enablement and pre-sales and all of that, like my background, right? So doing this masterclass I was talking about, it was 12 hours, but it's because I knew exactly what I was after, why I was after it, and how I wanted it presented. Then I let it go and do its thing and do all this really, good looking stuff and all. It was like, yay, I look like I'm fabulous, right? But it was all of that other human stuff that got it to where it is.
I'd love to end today's conversation with maybe if you could give some advice for someone who wants to get into enablement, or maybe they're early in their career in enablement and, wants to kind of get to where you are. Like, how do you have a successful career in enablement? Like, what advice would you give to somebody like that?
I'd like to say it was climbing an enablement ladder, but it really was a jungle gym. Like, I did all sorts of different things. I mean, I was in marketing, I was in development, I was in product management, I was in, you name it. I came into this actually in 2008. So out of really bad time came really good things because I was running pre-sales at the time, and the SVP of sales came to me and said, well, I need you to do something else. I need you to, whatever you're doing over here, I need you to do with everybody because I don't have to worry about you, but I'm worrying about all these others. Can you do that? I'm like, what is that? She said, I don't know. I call it whatever you want, right? You're white labeling this thing. Go do it. And so initially I was the VP of Global Success Metrics, because even then I knew that data was going to be important. But I mean, sales enablement as a term didn't come out until, Forrester came out with it in 2012 or something. I mean, it hasn't been around all that long. What I would tell for people that are trying to get into it, new folks, is understand your charter first. Make sure that you have a very strong point of view. Make sure that you understand the relationship and you establish that relationship between what you provide and what your sales leadership. Now, notice I kept saying sales leaders are my customers, because they are. Salespeople are the lucky end users. They're not my customer. And a lot of that is that R2 and 4, right? I need frontline managers to be responsible for the execution of the programs. So they're my stakeholders. And so it's understanding how all of that works, having a point of view, making sure the 5 questions are asked so that you're working on the right things at the right time and you're not just a fixer of broken things. That's how we started this, right? If you're a fixer of broken things, you're never going to accomplish anything.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much for the time today, Sheevaun. This was a lot of fun.
You're welcome.
Thanks for tuning in to Grow and Tell. If you enjoyed today's conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also subscribe to our newsletter for weekly updates at growandtellshow.com. We'll see you next week. Thanks.